Hi, I'm Dr. Stephanie Taylor from the School of Psychology in the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, and I'm here to talk about my new book with Susan Luckman. The book's called The New Normal of Working Lives, Critical Studies in Contemporary Work and Employment, and it's a collection that Susan Luckman and I co-edited. Now, before I tell you exactly what it's about, I'd like to go back a bit and explain how I got interested in work as an academic subject. It started with some of my previous research on creativity and creative work. You may be aware of the creative sector as a part of the economy that lots of contemporary governments are promoting and encouraging. It's a growth area that produces new jobs. And when I did this first book with Karen Littleton, we started in art colleges because we were interested in how the idea of the artist promotes certain kinds of working practices and a certain view of a working life. For example, it's usually a very individual view, and it's the idea that you will be working on a personal project for your own creative fulfillment. And you might have to work on it for a long, long time before you get any reward or recognition. And after we'd been working on this for a while, I came to notice that many of the ideas associated with creative work were actually just extending into work more generally. And as a result, I decided to kind of look at those similarities and to look at what was becoming normal about a working life in contemporary society, in an affluent society like the UK. Susan Luckman and I put together two streams at a conference. In other words, we invited academics who had related interests. And this was at a conference in Finland in 2015. And the academics presented and subsequently wrote up their work as chapters which are part of the new book. And they give a very clear picture of how work has changed. So, for example, there are a lot of chapters which are about people working in different places. There are women working from home. They might be running a little craft business and selling their goods on Etsy. They might be doing something completely new like blogging. There are families who are using their houses to host other people. So again, they're able to combine their earning, they hope, with their family and childcare life. And then there are the new kinds of work that are connected to digital technologies, which of course create lots of differences in working practices. As well as working at home, you can work in transit, you can work when you're traveling. There are people who work in co-working spaces, which in some countries are government-sponsored and in other places they're private, but there's some kind of shared space where you pay to be there and use it. And it might have some particular equipment that you might want to use, like a 3D printer. And as well as those, there are interesting new jobs which have often started as a kind of hobby or personal interest. So people who are involved in video game development, for example, or vlogging, and they have turned that personal interest into a way of earning. They've monetized it. And of course, a common consequence of that is that the difference between their personal time and their work time is very blurred. And then there are different ways of organizing work. So for example, one of the chapters is about, in Sweden, women who look after elderly people. And previously they did that as government employees. But now they've been encouraged to set up their own small businesses where they do this caring as part of a private enterprise. And we're interested in the pros and cons of this. Work's become much more individualized. It's become a personal responsibility. People expect to do work that they love. That's a very strong overtone of the creative work. They expect to work very hard, possibly for less reward. You may be aware that now it's 1 in 8, 15% of workers in the UK who in some way work for themselves. So they're self-employed or they're freelance or they run their own business. And it's half of us who work unpaid overtime, which is of course partly a consequence of digital technologies like the availability of email. You're never really completely away from work. So we've put together the book about this, and we are particularly pleased with the collection. And my interest as a social psychologist is in how these different work practices and also these different ways of thinking about work are changing society and changing us as members of that society.